Hello everyone, I'm day weather meteorologist Don Day with your Public Lands Council weekly weather update for this May 6, 2023. It's being brought to you by Ag Risk Advisors and WSR Insurance Services Incorporated. Well, it's been an interesting first week of May. We saw a big warm up in the Rockies and the central and western high plains, while unseasonably cool weather and more wet weather was in California, the Pacific Northwest, and we had snow in the Great Lakes and parts of the northeastern United States. Very cool weather in the eastern side of the U.S., while the middle of the country had a nice warming trend. What's ahead for this next week? Well, it is going to be a little cooler. Not a lot, but a little cooler in the Rockies and western high plains, and certainly it will remain cooler than normal in the Great Basin in California in the coming days over the next week or so, while it will warm up a little bit in the Midwest and the East as temperatures will begin to moderate there. We're going to have occasional chances of precipitation. Now, initially, it'll be the Pacific Northwest, the central and northern Rockies, then up into the northern plains that have the best chance of precipitation through the early parts of next week. A larger storm may spread precipitation over a wider area, maybe some of the southern areas that need it, as we get to the second half of next week, as it looks like a fairly typical May pattern is going to develop here over the next 7 to 10 days. And yes, folks, I think late next week, some of the high elevations of the central and northern Rockies could still have a chance of snow, something to keep an eye on. Over the last week, precipitation has fallen, but it really hasn't been very impressive. For the month of May, these are fairly light to moderate amounts in this area here, but you can see California got wet again, Great Basin drying out, some of the southern plains picking up a little bit more, and you can see all the rain and the cool, wet weather in the eastern half of the United States. And you can really see what happened with temperatures. We mentioned how in the last week it really warmed up in the western high plains and Rockies, then across western Canada, while the very cool weather was centered in the east and Midwest, and very cool weather along the California coastal areas. We'll see some of this warmth shift a little bit more to the east by the middle to the end of next week as a trough of low pressure this weekend settles into Washington and Oregon. There's going to be some showers and thunderstorms across some areas of the upper plains, central plains, and parts of the northern Rockies and northern plains, while warmer weather develops in the Midwest and into the Corn Belt. Then by late next week, this is by next Friday, we've got a low that gets cut off from the main jet stream. And this is typical as you get into May. You get these low pressure systems that kind of slowly meander. And that's why May can be a wet month. These slow-moving, meandering low-pressure systems can bring a period of several days in a row of cooler, damp conditions. And you want that this time of year to bring needed precipitation. So we see that as a possibility during the second half of next week, something to keep an eye on. A quick El Nino update. While we're not technically in an El Nino yet, the latest projections show this green line is the average of all the computer modeling that tries to predict sea surface temperature out in the Pacific. And what it's showing is that by late summer and early fall, officially we'll be in an El Nino. Right now we're in a neutral status, but the good news overall here is we're not talking about anybody going back into a La Nina. It's going to be an El Nino later this summer into the fall and winter of 2024. Now, over the next 7 to 10 days, the outlook for precipitation is pretty good. You see lots of oranges, blues, and yellows there. Those areas of the deeper reds and oranges where the heavier precipitation is likely going to fall over the next week. Although I have to warn you, some of this could be shifting a little more south, depending on the track of that next low coming into the west. And there's what we talked about earlier. There still is the potential for high elevation snows with that storm system during the second half of next week, and we'll need to keep an eye on that. Our next update will be the 13th. Have a good week ahead, everybody.